William Lee, Chief Economist at Milken Institute. William, always a pleasure. Thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start by asking about the sanctions against Russia. To what degree is the U.S. action hurting Moscow? And it certainly appears that the Biden administration could further tighten the screws if it had the opportunity.
Well, the purpose of the restrictions, I think, is something of a controversy. It was supposed to deter, but then now it may not be to deter, but just to make life difficult for those embarking on this campaign of war. So I think the objectives are things that the administration has had mixed messages on. The key to the sanctions is that we know that it's a tool that politicians have used and nations have used against other nations to try to get them to change undesirable behavior, like the Nazi and Japanese invasion in World War II and the apartheid policies in South Africa.
Let's move on. Talk about the U.S.-China trade issues. The U.S. trade chief today was blunt in her assessment on U.S.-China trade, and she basically said that punishing tariffs haven't had the impact and that China's position remains the same, and that now is the time to reinvest in the United States manufacturing base. Your thoughts on that, and could that happen?
No, Ambassador Tai is expressing a huge level of frustration about how it's so difficult for the two largest economies in the world to arrive at a 21st century framework that defines the new rules of engagement for trade. And I think that's one of the things that has crossed administrations. It has been a priority for the United States and for China for several administrations now. And I think one of the things that Catherine Tai has mentioned is that we need new policy tools. Tariffs are just way too blunt. And I think one of the things that is going to be done over the next year or so as the Biden administration ramps up its trade policy is to try to develop these new tools, to try to develop alliances that would fit the 21st century trade, digital economy, labor standards, and environmental standards, the sustainability of production.
Yeah, but that's perhaps down the road. Right now, we're still looking at these tariffs, and China has long railed against them, saying they do nothing but hurt consumers, both in China and the United States, and they've been calling for discussions. Is that fair, the way they are wording that, and could that happen?
You know, it's two sides that are facing off each other, and each side refuses to make that first step and to make a meaningful step. And I think one of the things that's going to make these discussions prolonged is as long as these two sides maintain that position, we're going nowhere. One side has to say, yes, we see the tariffs, we see the restrictions. Now, what do we do about them? What can we do to change the framework? That hasn't been discussed.
So you think if one side could take that first step, do you think the dominoes would fall?
Oh, absolutely. I think right now they're at loggerheads, and neither side wants to make that first move because it's viewed as a concession. And I think one of the things that may come in would be a third party. The U.S. is already resorting to improving relations with Japan, the European Union, to try to set an example for what that 21st century trade framework is going to look like.
Well, let's talk a bit more about that, because Trade Representative Catherine Tai today talking about the Phase 1 deal and how China has not met the terms of that deal. China does not agree with the way that is being characterized and has blamed COVID for adversely affecting trade. Now, as you mentioned, these two largest economies on earth, can they find common ground?
Let's hope so. I think we are at the battleground where no motion is possible because each side accuses the other of not doing the first step. The U.S. has tariffs so that we are not importing more Chinese goods, and the Chinese are saying, well, our ports are shut down, and COVID has just stopped us from honoring our commitments. But let's face it, China hasn't even come close to the average level of 2017 to 2019 trade that was in existence before the agreement. So there's a lot of ground that China can make way for, and the U.S. has already taken steps to reduce tariffs on 300 some odd goods.
And William, I think this last question is important. China has had a lot of success in finding new trade partners. Now, some in the United States fear the Biden administration is simply not doing enough to promote U.S. free trade. Compare and contrast how these two nations are faring when it comes to international trade in Asia.
Well, China has done a tremendous job of trying to reshape the Indo-Pacific alliance to try to promote a trade zone within Asia. The United States is, I think, many steps behind in doing that same thing. One of the things that the United States wants to promote is intellectual property and trade in services and financial services accessed in different markets. China, I think, can benefit a lot from that increased flow of financial services, especially modern Western financial services into China, and that's a first step, a place for a first step to take place.